I chose some jars with removable lids so that I could add some fairy lights inside later on. So to join up the jars, I just used some tin foil and I scrunched this up into sausage shapes. I used tin foil to join the two jars together using hot glue to stick it down, and I also used the tin foil to create some different shapes on my jars, such as a door, a window, and some little toadstools going up the side. I also shaped a couple of big blades of grass, which I glued around the window and the door. And then I filled the kind of gaps of the lids, if that makes sense, with tin foil so that I could create a big mushroom shape as the roof of the fairy house. I did this by sticking some cones onto the top and making that kind of like mushroom cap shape. Then all you need to do is cover the whole thing in paper clay, and I used Fimo Air, which is just a basic paper clay. And I just took pieces and covered the whole thing using water to smooth down any lumps. I also added some little clay balls to the tops of the mushrooms to give them those little white spots that you see on toadstools. For the big mushroom, I added a load of lines with a metal sculpting tool just to give it the classic mushroom look before covering the rest of the fairy house with paper clay. You can use your finger with the water to smooth it all down, but for some of the nooks and crannies it is easier to use a sculpting tool. I also added some random windows in places just for extra details. Obviously you can add whatever details you want to your fairy house, but I thought these looked cute with some miniature window frames. Don't forget to draw any details onto the blades of grass or the bottom of the toadstools on the side, if you added toadstools that is. For the door, I just put a big clay sausage over the frame and I joined this up and smoothed it down. Then I added some details onto the door and made it look like it was made out of bark or wood or what have you. I also wanted the door itself to look like it was a jar. So as I mentioned earlier, I was inspired by Tinkerbell herself to use a kind of acorn cap, acorn lid, whatever it's called, and I sculpted this by making a shallow bowl shape, putting a load of lines all over it, and then adding a little stalk. Put this to the side, and once all the clay is dry, we can move on to painting. So I wanted my mushroom caps to look nice and bright like toadstools. I used acrylic ink for the whole fairy house just because the colours are so vibrant, and I did go over the little spots with white paint just so that they were nice and clean looking. For the mushroom stalk colour, I used an ochre blended with white just so it had like a gradient effect. Don't forget to paint all the mushrooms on the side as well. I used a very vibrant green for the blades of grass, and for the overall house I kind of just mixed a loads of different colours. You can paint it whatever colour you want. You could even have a rainbow fairy house, that would look pretty cool, but I wanted it to look sort of natural as well as colourful, if you know what I mean. So I stuck to a kind of bricky, beigey yellow. The door I just painted brown like wood. I made a mini hinge and hot glued this to the door frame, to which I glued the acorn door. And then it was time to add the finishing touches, so I just stuck on some model moss and then some colourful model flowers. And you can just stick these anywhere. I just added them in random places because moss grows in random places. And of course, what would a fairy house be without some pink fairy dust?